All right. So you're seeing here, this PDF right here is what I'm currently using to learn Georgian. This is Dakiravebuli Shroma da Kapitali, also known in the original German as Lohnarbeit und Kapital, or in English, Wage, Labor, and Capital, by Karl Marx. And you might be sitting here thinking that seems like a bit of an advanced text to be using, especially because I am very much not what you would call an advanced learner in Georgian. I mean, I understand a fair bit these days of what I read, and less, but still, some of what I hear. I'd say probably I'm at the point where I can make sense out of. No, well, I wouldn't even say half, but it depends a little bit on what it is. And there's this idea of things being advanced, vocabulary is advanced and stuff like that. Texts are advanced. And what I want to do right now is kind of push back on that a little bit. That's the idea here. Because, yeah, obviously, this is Marx explaining how wage, labor, and capital fit together. That it is full of concepts that you would not generally get from a beginning level language course. But that doesn't matter. I'm going to explain to you why that actually doesn't matter and why this concept of like advanced vocabulary and stuff like that is actually twak. Kak. Unsinn. Una stupidaggine. Una wea absurda. Totalmente sin significado real. It's crap. In other words, mato hazure. Okay, so, and here's why. See, this idea that we have of advanced vocabulary mostly comes from the sort of sequence that language teachers and language textbooks and stuff like that use. And there's no real reason that you have to follow that sequence. There's no reason that you have to know this is the brown house before you can say, capital is a social relation. Linguistically, it makes no difference. The only difference is that one contains more concepts that are sort of more commonly known than the other. But linguistically, it doesn't really matter, because the language is the language. No matter what kind of text you're going to read, no matter what kind of content you're going to watch, listen to, or whatever, in your target language, it is always going to have the language in it. It's always going to have word order and words and morphology and prefixes and suffixes if it's a kind of language that has those, and a case system if there's one of those, and verbs and verb forms and all that stuff. It's all there, no matter what the thing is talking about. And grammar, what we know from all sorts of studies, is that grammar comes above all from reading, especially pleasure reading. And that language acquisition comes when we are looking at input we can comprehend. Doesn't have to, that doesn't, and understanding messages, and doing so in a context that is stress-free to the extent possible, and also compelling, interesting. Stuff that you actually care about. The more you actually care about the content that you're using, the easier it will be for your brain to start integrating that stuff with integrating that stuff into its ability to operate. You're going to, so it doesn't actually matter. Like basic vocabulary, advanced vocabulary. No, these are not real things. This is just a system of categories that seem to make sense to people who teach languages. Because the thing about language, again, is what we're doing when we are looking at a text or listening to watching content or whatever, is we're connecting these words and structures and things in our target language with the sort of general knowledge that we have in our brains. I mean, and so what matters more than anything is the ability to integrate those things. The more you're able to sort of integrate this general knowledge that you already have, the concepts that you know, that you understand, with these words and structures that are used to express those concepts in your target language, the more we can start talking about fluency, which is a complicated concept, much more so than a lot of people realize. So if and what those sort of general knowledge concepts that people have are it's going to vary depending on what people are interested in, what they've studied, what they do every day. Like for some people, that that general fund of knowledge is going to include like estoppel. It's going to include an easement. Other people, it's going to include things like an exhaust manifold, or a motherboard, or a PCS bus, or, socially necessary labor time, or primary fermentation. And people's level of interest is going to vary. Also, people are going to tend to have more sort of general knowledge focused on the things that they actually care about for one reason or another. So in that sense, a text that is actually dealing with things that you're interested in, and I, for example, have long been meaning to really actually read more Marx, actually. Like, I've read some, I thought it was interesting, very worthwhile, but not so much that I feel that I actually can say that I have a full grasp on his work. So, and one of the useful things about Marx, from a language learning standpoint, is that his works have been translated into 1 million languages. So you can find him in all sorts of languages, especially the really well-known stuff. Georgian, there is, you can get the stuff for free as well. I found this on Marxist.org. There's a whole section of, like, Georgian Marx translations, also Bordiga as well, and a few others as well. But, so, the thing now is that what you're doing when you look at a text like this, because you've got familiar words, you've got unfamiliar words, and some words that are related to words and other words that they absolutely have no familiarity. There's no recall. You've never seen anything that even looks like it before. And so it rings 0 bells. But you also have that general knowledge we were talking about. And so that can fill in blanks. Because what every single bit of language, including the way we learn it and the way we use it and the way it's structured, it's all about relationships. It's all about context. And what you're doing when you look at something like this and you find things that maybe you don't actually understand, that are novel to you, is you're finding the relationships that they're in. So, and part of that is words you already recognize. You'll see, say, in Georgian, for example, samushao. Well, maybe you already know mushaops, or vmushaop. Vmushaop means I work. Mushaops, third person of works. And samushao, well, you've got most of that word sounds like it's related. And so you say, well, wait a second, maybe these things are connecting. Your brain mostly unconsciously, is making these connections. And the more things become obvious, the more you get used to the way these things are structured and formed in your target language, the more reflexively that's going to just happen. And your brain's just going to serve up, oh, this is from that word, and stuff like that. And where there are just complete blanks, you have this general knowledge, these concepts that you can draw on if you know that these concepts are going to be in there. So, this works with basically anything. I would, that's not to, so you can sort of draw on these sort of concepts and things like that if you already know, for example, you know what this book, what this essay, don't know if it really counts as book length. I haven't finished it in any language. I've read like half of it in German. Then you already know what he's going to be talking about. You know, he's going to be talking about things like value and exchange value and capital and labor power and time and how and commodities and how these things relate. And so your brain, with that general knowledge, is already kind of serving up those words because it expects to find them in some form. And so you're going to sort of gradually, and so when there are gaps, but you understand the relationship between some of the words, your brain will serve up, possibilities based on what is expected because you already know something about what's going on here. And the grammar and all of the other things that make the language work, those are all going to be there. These are, I sometimes call this stuff fractals, which isn't quite right because fractals have every single aspect of the thing at all levels. But with languages, you're not necessarily getting every single aspect of it, but you're always getting at least some aspects of it. And the bigger your sample, the more aspects of it, the greater the percentage of things about how the language works you're likely to be seeing. Now, yeah, and it really doesn't matter what you're looking at. I mean, you could be looking at videos in Italian about how to build a PC or something like that. And I might say, and so, they might say, okay, questa è la scheda madre Tomahawk M750. And if you are a hardware nerd, and I'm sort of an apprentice hardware nerd, I've built a PC once and I upgraded it once. And you might say, Tomahawk M750. Oh, scheda madre. Madre, sì, mother, innit? And they're holding the thing, and you say, oh, okay, so scheda madre Tomahawk. Yeah, except I got the number wrong. It's B550. B550, you say scheda madre, maybe that's motherboard? Especially if the person is like holding it or pointing to it or something like that, because you've already got the concept of motherboard. You know what one is, you know what it looks like. Or, say you're learning German and you're like, you're like a gearhead or something like that, and so you're interested in like car shit. So you're looking at videos on, I don't know, engine rebuilds. And the person doing the video says, yeah, also das hier, das ist der Abgaskrümmer. And they're pointing to an exhaust manifold. And so you say, okay, der Abgaskrümmer. And what you've got there is various things. For one thing, you've got the structure. This is. For another thing, you've got the gender of the noun, der Abgaskrümmer. And you've got Abgas, which means exhaust, and you might say, oh, well, the word gas is in there, isn't that? Could that be the same as the English word gas? And then Krümmer. And you might say, okay, so maybe that's also like manifold. But you have the concept of an exhaust manifold, so your brain is serving that up and linking these things. And as you consume this kind of content, whether you're reading it or you're listening to it or something like, or whatever, watching it, these links are being made. So it doesn't really matter what is advanced vocabulary or whatever. What matters is it's interesting and you have some sort of connection to it that helps you, it helps you get from incomprehension to comprehension of at least some of it. And as I've said a number of times, it doesn't, you're not going to understand everything. You may not even understand most things. Like, there's a whole lot in this I do not understand. But you understand more every time you do it if there are the sort of, if the basics are there, in the sense of you have some concepts that are related to it that you're familiar with. You know at least a couple of the words, and the thing is, I mean, Georgian doesn't help you out in many ways, but it does help you out with there being lots of loan words like capitali, which means capital, and the fact that being agglutinative, you related words, related concepts tend to have like related structures in the word, like mushaups and samushao and tsarmoeba, tsarmoebiti, which means like production or of production or something like that. What I would say in terms of, yeah, it's there are prerequisites. The most important thing, again, and we're going to be getting back to relationships. If to really get started, to understand how to express basic relations. Sort of the Booleans, for example, like equals, this is this. Understanding, and, or, negation, not, this is not this. Understanding, connections between concepts. This is the this of that. Or between statements about concepts, like this is this, but that is that. And if you have those sorts of the basics of how to start, understanding those relationships, of how to start explain about how to express those relationships, at least on a passive level, you can already start to get going. I mean, start to get going. That's really, I don't know. That's not the best phrase I've ever heard. You can get a start on it, especially if you have that general knowledge, you have some familiarity with the concepts you're expecting. If you've got like visual aids, anything that helps you comprehend, graphics and stuff like that. Yeah, so don't be afraid of reading stuff in like your field of interest as learning material, especially because actually just because it's advanced, it's technical or something, it's specialized uh in some way or another, that does not, if it's if it's a specialization you actually are familiar with, if it's an area then you actually have more access to these texts than you might like assume in the abstract based on your knowledge of the language. If you already understand the basic concepts at work, then the fact that you don't necessarily understand the words that are being used to express those concepts does not make it impossible for you to use it as learning material, if you understand that you're not going to get everything, that it may be a slow process, that it will take time, and that a lot of it you will not be aware is going on. It is going on unconsciously. It is implicit learning that's going on in your brain. But you will be getting more and more gradually. Like, so, let me just find an example here, because, like, again, let me find the section I've been reading. Because I've just gradually learned more and more. Where am I? Where am I in all of this? That's the end. Okay, I'm... Oh, hell. That took me all the way back. Give me a second. I'm going to cut this out of the VOD. This is really exciting me, like, having to flip through the pages, I know. But... Manifesti. Bourgeoisia da contrrevoluția da chiravebuli Roma da capitali. Here we go. This is where we're looking. Oh, this is... Oh, hang on. This is the foreword, which I didn't actually read this time. Okay, so when I started this, there were a number of words that I did not immediately understand. So we have, like, here's a sentence at the beginning. Riti gani saz chreba sakonlis pasi. Riti means by what? Now, the word, okay, so what we know, like, I did not know this, gani saz chreba. Sakoneli is commodity and pasi is price. Chel pasi is wage, literally hand price. But I did not really know ganisas chreba. But what I know is that Marx is talking about how things are being determined. Well, so what kind of question is he going to be asking? Riti ganisas chreba sakonlis pasi. Sakonlis means of the commodity. Pasi, the price of a commodity or the commodity. So my immediate instinct is that probably this is going to be how is it determined. And as you go through there, that continues to confirm itself. And one final note in here that I'd like to just make, which is that they're looking things up for the most part is not particularly useful. It's kind of counterproductive. It takes you out of the flow of the thing, and the flow of the thing is important because the flow is the relationships. Yeah, it is. So you want to avoid doing that, but it doesn't. Once in a while, especially if you're trying to confirm your instinct, or if it's a word that's all over the place and you're just not getting it, and then once in a while, that's not a bad thing. Once in a while, you can go and look up. Like, I looked up Sakoneli. I had a feeling that it was probably going to be commodity, but I wasn't sure, and I wanted to be totally certain. And so that didn't hurt, and it, of course, opens up all sorts of possibilities, because the more words you know, the more context you have for making sense out of the ones you don't. So don't overdo looking things up. Don't go looking up every single word because you will never get a flow going. But, every once in a while, if you're trying to confirm your suspicion of what a thing means, or, it's just a word you keep seeing and nothing's helping you, then it's not going to hurt to do that.